Hello, everybody. So we're starting a new unit. This is Unit 4, Intro to Learning. And learning here is basically how do we learn behaviors. So we're focusing on behaviors, which is something that is observable, and typically it's measurable. I could count it. So observable, I should be able to see it, and I should be able to count it. Okay, so these people, this unit is more very much about the behaviors we see outwardly. How do we learn them? Okay, so we're going to start with what we started in class, and we'll start with the definition. This is good for those students that were not in class, and then a refresher for those that were. Okay, and make sure that you have all those notes. So your notes will be intro to psychology up at the top. And learning is what is learning? So, learning basically for this unit is a systematic, typically a permanent change in behavior that results from experience, practice, okay? And so I say typically it's permanent because the more we do something, the more it tends to be permanent, right? So the more we do a behavior, such as walking, it's a permanent change in our behavior. Um, but us as humans, we are malleable, meaning we are constantly changing. We have the capabilities of doing that, which we can do that with any type of behavior that doesn't serve us. We can always change it, okay? And again, it's a systematic approach. So there has to be a system in place of changing that behavior, okay? So another little note there is repeated acts that so behaviors, well, sorry, typically we learn behaviors if it brings a reward, okay? Or we do it to avoid unwanted results, okay? Now, um, skip a line and go to behaviorism. This is our next little section. And behaviorism is the same thing as the behavioral approach. You know, those little fingers we did in class, it's the middle one. And the reason is because for behaviorism, this is a theory that learning focuses on observable behavior, what we can see. Okay. In this one with behaviorism, they do not take into account cognition or unconscious thought. Like it's just what do I see in the outer part of what they're doing, right? Like it's a physical thing that I could see with my eyes. Such as walking, rolling my eyes, brushing my teeth, raising my hand. Those are all behavioral behaviors that we can see. Okay, like anything with our thoughts, unconscious, our wishes, what we want is not, they don't really go into that. Um, for behaviorism, they believe, so this is another thing that you're writing down, they believe that the environment shapes us on who we are or who we will become. Okay, and this is called environmental determinism. So I want everybody to write that down because I know you don't have it from the class. So for them, they focus on the nurture part of that, nature versus nurture. They don't look at biological. It's just how does the environment shape, like basically they shape who you are. Um, and that would be environmental determinism, right? Like the environment determines your behaviors. Now, we can change people's behaviors by manipulating circumstances, right? Like changing the circumstances in order to um, develop the behaviors that we want. Okay. So the guy for behaviorism, the one that started it was John Watson. Okay. He is the father of behaviorism, and he basically focused on observable behaviors as well as associative learning. And we did write that in class. Associative learning is basically when we make an association of like two stimulus that they're kind of happening at the same time. Okay. So we associate, a desk in a classroom, it's to sit, right? Chairs in classroom are there to sit. You go to, the PE field, you associate, playing sports. So it's just like we connect, it's like a connection, a link between like an event and things. Okay, and we'll go a little bit into that as we go. Now, this is another one that it actually has to do with a the ways that we learn behavior. And there's three different kind of approaches and things that we're going to discuss. These are the systematic approaches, right, of teaching a behavior or learning a behavior. And so you're going to have this worksheet that I gave to everybody. It looks something like this. And this is where I want you to fill out the, actually, don't fill out that information. Never mind. Slamana's not feeling very well. So excuse me for, I'm gonna mess up a little bit. Anyway, this is what I want you to do. You're going to write this down so then you could transfer it, that information, rewrite it in that worksheet is what I want you guys to do. Okay, so these are the different types of learning. The first one is called classical conditioning, and it's the one that we're going to go into that will require a lot of practice, right? So these things all have kind of like their own terms, and we will require a lot of practice. It's a good thing to practice seeing over and over again. So anyway, the first one we're going to go into is classical conditioning, okay? And this is basically when we associate two stimuli, okay, and anticipate an event. So we associate these two stimuli, which I want you to write down. A stimuli is basically can be anything. It can be a thing, a person, a location, literally anything. Everything around us is a stimuli. People could be a stimuli. Events, specific events can be a stimuli. So it's just basically associating two things and then anticipating this event. Now, I want you to also write that this is physical. So this is a physical response, okay, that our bodies do kind of automatically, okay? The next one is that when we associate anything, it links it to an automatic response to the stimuli. Okay, so I want you to write that down. And then I want you to put in parentheses, it's biological, which means your body does it automatically without realizing it. Okay. The next one is going to be, so for example, anytime you hear lightning, okay, so when you hear, I'm sorry, not hear, when you see lightning, right, your body already anticipates, especially if you're scared of it, your body already anticipates, starts getting cringy, like cringes, because you've associated, if I see lightning, there's going to be thunder, which makes a loud noise. That loud noise typically creates an automatic response, right? So we don't even have to hear it, right, to know, like, oh my gosh, this loud sound is coming soon. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit more. Then the next one is going to be operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is when you learn to associate a response, okay, and in parentheses put behavior and its consequence. Now in this class, in this section, please write on the side, what does consequence mean? Because it's not, we have it like it's a bad thing. And here in this case, consequence is literally just the outcome. What happens when I make my bed, okay, in the morning? What's the outcome? Am I gonna get screamed at or am I gonna be praised, right? So consequence is just literally the outcome of what I do. If I raise my hand in class and the teacher picks me, then I've made an association that if I raise my hand, the teacher is going to pick me. Okay, that's just an example. Now, under upper conditioning, now we learn to write this down. Learn to repeat acts or behaviors if it's followed by a good result. And then we avoid certain behaviors that follows a bad result. Okay? So that's operant conditioning. The next one is social learning. So if you look at these two very much are like they only look at the behavior. Social learning also looks at the behavior, but we're gonna throw in some cognitive stuff as well. So some kind of changes, but for social learning, it's literally that we are copying, we learn behaviors through observing others, right? And that's called observational learning. It's like obvious wording, right? We like when these vocabs make sense. So for social learning, we learn behaviors through observational learning by watching and mimicking others, which is basically just modeling what we see. Okay, so this is why when you hang out with somebody, you start copying like their mannerism, you start talking to that, so talking like them. Okay, so social learning, you learn, to do the dishes by watching people. Um, so things like that. That's social learning. And then they've added this other component of the social learning with cognition, and we'll get into that. But this is really basically under behaviorism. These are kind of the three things that they look at, um, of how we are able to uh, adjust behavior. Okay, so now I want you to go to the next page. Okay, so this you guys will do on your own, kind of give some examples so we could talk about it in class.